Hi guys, my name is Blake. Welcome to my channel. Today I am bringing you a list of some of the worst reads that I had in 2021, and these are in no particular order, and I will have timestamps down below for everything. But before I get started, I just want to say these are just my opinions. I can see why they are well liked by others, and I would still encourage people to pick these up if they think they sound good. Maybe some of the things I didn't like about them will be things that you like. The first book I want to talk about is The Gilded Cage by Vic James, and we are in this alternate London setting where those with magic abilities are those in power, and they are a very small percent of the population, and everyone else without magical abilities is forced into 10 years of servitude to these powerful beings. And that is kind of the setup for this story, and we are following this family as they are doing their forced servitude. And this book is very much a dystopian inspired setting, and I did not know that going in. I really don't like dystopian. It just doesn't work for me in any setting, and I don't know why. I thought that this book was going to be very politics heavy, and I thought that it was going to be very magic heavy. It is not. It is a very character-driven and slower-paced story. We are following this family as they go into their 10 years of servitude, and they are forced to work for this extremely powerful family. And this family has a lot of political maneuvering going on, but we don't really see the political maneuvering from their side. We're seeing most of it through the perspective of the family, and I think that was a huge bummer. I also didn't really care about any of the characters, and the magic system is never really explained, and I had a lot of questions throughout the book that never got answered. And when I finished reading this, I just didn't care enough to continue. Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi, and this is the second book in the Legacy of Orisha series, and it is a YA fantasy. I am extremely bummed about this one. I won't be going into spoilers because it is a sequel, but I read the first book when it came out years and years ago, and I really enjoyed it. I loved the magic system, and I loved the sibling dynamics. Sadly, everything that I loved about the first book wasn't here. I don't even know who the characters were in this installment. They didn't feel like themselves. They did things that were very out of character, and I feel like the character arcs that they had in book one were completely regressed in this book. I was like, come on guys, I thought we were past this. I thought that the whole point of book one was us, understanding this and getting past this. But no, we go all the way back to the beginning of book one, I feel like, with this book. And that was a huge bummer. And furthermore, one of our main characters, Zeely, just turns into a complete bully in this book. I hated reading from her perspective. She was incredibly selfish, incredibly mean to her family, to her friends. And I had no interest in reading about her because every chapter that she had felt exactly the same. It was just her whining and feeling sorry for herself. And it just made me angry to read. And also, everyone gets a romantic interest in this book, and I feel like they were very forced, and I just didn't buy the chemistry between the characters. And the magic system that I loved so much in the first book, we really don't get to explore it as much in this one. The next book I have is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And earlier this year, I saw everyone reading this book, and I really wanted to jump on the bandwagon and see what it was about, because I personally love witches, and a lot of people compare it to Twilight, and I loved Twilight when I was a teenager, so I was really wondering how I'd feel about it as an adult. And I picked this one up, and I can definitely see why it has those Twilight comparisons, but I really did not like this book. I liked the beginning of this book a lot. I really thought that it was going to be a good, solid read. I loved our main character, Diana. She is working at Oxford, and she does research, and she is a teaching assistant there, and she spends a lot of time in the Oxford Library, which I love. And I love the author's writing style. I think that she has really beautiful kind of poetic writing when she wants to, and I liked that aspect. But once the romance showed up, I feel like everything kind of fell apart on me. We spend pages and pages talking about their dates, how they do yoga together, the food they ate for dinner, the taste of the wine, the taste of the tea. And while I was reading this book, at some point I put the book down and I was like, what even is the point of this book? What are we reading about? Because I had completely forgotten. I was like, what is the plot of this book even about? We have kind of this magic book that Diana finds, and she is the only one who can find it, who can open it. And then it gets talked about kind of in the beginning, and kind of it's sprinkled throughout in pieces, but I feel like that's never really the main point of the story. I feel like the romance is the main point of the story, and I really didn't ship it. Matthew was an awful love interest. He's very manipulative and controlling, and he tells lies, and the red flags were everywhere. Matthew himself is a red flag, and I was not interested in any of that. In fact, there are things that he intentionally doesn't tell her, things that pertain to her life and her well-being, and he's like, nah, I'm not going to tell her. And it was really frustrating. And I feel like that was the entire book. And they have a lot of miscommunications, and I wasn't feeling it, any of it. And I also feel like the climax of this book was very short and wrapped up very quickly. And I was like very underwhelmed while reading this book. And the next book I have is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Guys, I was so bummed to have this book on my list. I actually really loved the first half of this book. I thought it was going to be a 5-star read until it wasn't. And in this book, we are following these Southern ladies in South Carolina, and then there is this newcomer in town, and there are a lot of very suspicious and strange things about him that don't add up. And our main character begins to assume that this man is a vampire. And throughout this book, it's kind of, is he a vampire? Is he not a vampire? We have that kind of unreliable narrator, and this book feels incredibly Southern, which I have lived in the South for the majority of my life, and I can tell you that that is exactly how this book feels, and I really love that feeling throughout this book. And the gossiping in the book club. It is a slower book, but I loved everything that was in the first half of this book. It kind of has these thriller elements. I like what the author did with the lore around vampires. I loved the feel of the book club, but once we made it to like the last quarter of this book, I was really frustrated. None of the characters stood up for themselves. The main character didn't stand up for herself. Her decision-making skills were terrible. I feel like as the book progressed, she just continued to make even more questionable decisions than before, and they just didn't make any sense. And there were so many situations where things would happen, and these are like really bizarre and disturbing things, and the main character wouldn't question it. Like, there were things I was like, if that was me, I would have been really freaked out. I wouldn't be able to let this go. I would not be able to sleep at night. And she's so calm about it. She's so fine. She's like, no big deal. And then she moves on and she never thinks about it again. And I'm like, what? But the ending of this book really killed this book for me. I felt like it was extremely anticlimactic. Everything wrapped up too clean, too quickly. And we have a sort of cliffhanger at the end. I call it a sort of cliffhanger because, like, the main question of the novel is wrapped up. The main mystery is answered. But there are still so many questions that I had that are not answered in this book. And it is a standalone, so like I will never get those answers that I really wanted. The next book I have on this list is Fire and Heist by Sarah Beth Durst. I also have Sarah Beth Durst on my adult fantasy novels that I loved for the year. And the reason why I picked this book up is because I loved her adult fantasy and I wanted to see how she did with the YA fantasy, and I was kind of disappointed. This book has were-dragons, and I think that this was purely just me because I don't like were-dragons, and I didn't realize that going in. The idea of people that can shift into dragons and then back into people, it doesn't work for me. I don't like that. But our main character is planning her first heist, and I love Heist, so I was excited about that part. But this book has a very contemporary feel to it. And I think other people would enjoy it. It seems to have really good ratings on Goodreads, but it just didn't work for me. I don't really like that contemporary writing style. It almost feels like it's written like a contemporary romance, and it does lean more to the younger side of YA. But I didn't love the heist aspect as much as I had thought I would either. The heist felt very rushed, and then there was also this portal fantasy element towards the end that I didn't like. And I have discovered that urban fantasy that leans more towards our world doesn't really work for me, and this one is very much existing in our world. There are just dragons among us and we can't see them. But in books like Harry Potter or the Dresden Files, those are also urban fantasy books, but we are very much within a magical setting. We are following wizards, and mostly everything that they do is really magic centered. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think while I was reading this book, I discovered that that's what is hit or miss for me when it comes to urban fantasy, is the fact that sometimes in urban fantasy it leans more urban and not fantasy. So I do think that this book did in a way help me figure out more of my reading taste. And this next book I wasn't even sure if I wanted to put on this list because it is a historical fiction and this is not my wheelhouse. I normally only read fantasy. But this was, in my opinion, my worst read of 2021. And that is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I hated this book. I don't read historical fiction very often. And I think that the writing style was really beautiful and poetic. And I can see why people love it. But it just was not for me. I had previously worked in a hospital, and there was a hospital book club amongst the ladies that worked there. And they were talking about how much they loved this book. They described it as being beautiful and life-changing. I read this book and I was bored to tears. I kept falling asleep while I was reading it. I wasn't interested in any of the characters. I felt lied to when I read the summary. It says that the two characters' lives will collide and they'll change each other's lives for forever. They really didn't meet each other for very long. Didn't seem that life-changing to me. And there is also this element where there's like a fantastical thing that's mentioned in the story, and it's kind of woven throughout. And I didn't feel like it needed to be there. It could have been the same story if that had been completely cut out. I do think that some of it could have been cut as well. Overall, I was extremely disappointed with this one, and it has insanely high ratings on Goodreads. It was the most popular book that I had read this year, and it has like, I think I wrote it down. It has a 4.32 rating on Goodreads. And I just was mind blown when I saw that. And that's all for today, and I'll see you again with another video soon. Bye!